Hi everyone! Today I'm going to do the first video in a series of videos about idioms. And the reason that I'm talking about idioms on my channel is because they are really important for intermediate and advanced level English learners. If you know some common idioms, it will help you to understand more when you read and listen to English. So in today's lesson, I'm going to talk very briefly about why idioms are important, and I'll give you a couple of tips for learning idioms, and then I'm going to present 10 common idioms that use body parts. And as always, if you find this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe. As you probably know, English idioms are common, but they can be challenging to learn. One reason that they are tricky is that they don't have a literal meaning. So what does that mean? An idiom is a group of words, like to give someone a hand, and we use these words together, but the meaning is not literal. That means that you don't literally give someone a hand. Instead, the meaning of these words is a special meaning that you have to memorize, and it has a meaning that is figurative, or the meaning is different from the actual exact words. Sometimes the words can help you to know the meanings, but other times you just have to memorize them and know how to use them. The second reason that idioms are tricky is that it's hard to know what idioms to learn. And so one thing that you want to remember is that British and American English have many different idioms. Some idioms are used in British English, some are used in American, and some are used in both. So this is a time that it's important to think about what type of English you're learning, and then to focus on the idioms that are used in that type of English. Idioms can be different depending on age or generation. So there are a lot of idioms that everybody uses: old people, young people, people in the past, people nowadays. But there are some other idioms that change over time. And I'll give you an example. One famous idiom that a lot of English learners learn is to break a leg. Have you heard this before, to break a leg? To break a leg means good luck. Like if my son is gonna go to a soccer game, I can say break a leg. But this idiom is not used often anymore. It's kind of an old-fashioned idiom, and not many people use this nowadays. If you want to learn more idioms, you need to think about how you can best spend your time learning them. You want to think about which idioms are more important now. So start with idioms that are the most common. Try to pay attention to what idioms people are using in conversation or on TV shows. You can also ask a native speaker for some tips about idioms that they use. You can try to do some research online about common idioms. And you can use the Learner's Dictionary online to help you. And I'm going to explain how to do that in the description box below. Finally, with idioms, you want to pay attention to the words in the idiom, because most idioms you cannot change the words. You need to say the idiom as a set phrase of exact words. Going back to my example about give someone a hand, we never say give someone the hand, or give someone two hands, or give someone hands. It's always to give someone a hand. So pay attention to the words in the idiom and make sure that you use them correctly. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about 10 common idioms that include body parts. And for some reason, body parts are really common in idioms. There are many, many of them, but I'm going to focus on just 10 common ones today. So let's get started. Number 1, rule of thumb. Rule of thumb. A rule of thumb is a guideline or a way of doing things that's based on experience or common sense. A rule of thumb is not a strict rule. It's not a rule that everybody follows. It's not a rule that people must follow. Instead, it's a way of doing things that most people or many people do because it's a good way or it just makes sense. So let me give you an example. A good rule of thumb for keeping your closet organized is to get rid of clothes that you haven't worn for a year. So again, this is a kind of way of doing it that is based on common sense, and not everybody does it this way. It's not a rule everyone must follow, but it's a rule of thumb. Here's another example. As a rule of thumb, stocks that have greater risk also have the potential to earn you more money. Number 2, to give someone a hand. So in this idiom, the word hand here means help. So to give someone a hand means to give someone help or to help someone. And this idiom actually can change. So let me show you what you can do. You're always going to keep a hand the same, but the other verb can change. So if you want to ask for help, you can say, I need a hand, or can you give me a hand, or I can use a hand. If you want to offer help, you can say, do you need a hand with that? Or can I give you a hand? Or can I lend you a hand? We can also use the verb lend. Or would you like a hand with that? Meaning, can I help you with that? And we use the preposition with to talk about help with something. Can I give you a hand with that suitcase? Number 3, off the top of my head. This is a really common one, and it means that you can think of something or remember something very quickly without having to stop and think about it. So try to imagine like information going off the top of your head quickly without having to stop and think about it. For example, I can think of 3 Japanese car companies off the top of my head: Toyota, Nissan, and Honda. If a student in my class asks me for some examples, sometimes I can say, I can only think of one example off the top of my head. Give me a few more hours and I'll try to think of some more examples and I'll get back to you. We often use this one in the negative to say that we can't remember something quickly. Like, I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Or, I want to make this type of soup that I love, but I can't remember the recipe off the top of my head. I'm going to have to look it up. Number 4, to have a good head on your shoulders. To have a good head on your shoulders means that you are responsible, that you're a good person, that you don't do bad things. And we usually use this idiom to describe young people who are mature and responsible and who make good decisions. So for example, I can say, my nephew is only 20 years old and he's moving to Germany next month, but I'm not worried about him because he has a good head on his shoulders. Number 5, to have cold feet or to get cold feet. To have cold feet means that you try to do something that's dangerous or something that's like super important, and you just get really nervous at the last minute. You get cold feet. I'm sure that in your language you have a similar idiom. We use this idiom a lot to talk about what happens before someone gets married. Sometimes before the wedding, a person can get cold feet and they just get really nervous and they almost change their mind. Or sometimes they even change their mind. We can say, for example, she wanted to marry him, but the day before the wedding, she got cold feet and she called off the wedding. So again, to get cold feet is to get really nervous to the point that you think about maybe you will not do it. And sometimes you actually change your mind and don't do it. Another example could be, I wanted to go bungee jumping, but at the last minute, I got cold feet. So this is an example of an idiom that doesn't really have another way to express that meaning. Every time that we talk about this situation, we're going to use this exact idiom because there isn't really another way to express this. Number 6, to have a foot in the door. This is a very common idiom that's used in work situations or when you are applying for a job. To have a foot in the door or to get a foot in the door means that you take the first step to get noticed by a company or an organization. So for example, I had an assistant a few years ago who wanted to get a better job at the college where I teach. And I told him, you know, it's not easy to get jobs here, so you might want to do some volunteer work or continue working part-time to get a foot in the door. The idea here is that if you have your foot in the door, that after a while the company will notice you and maybe they will open the door and give you a job. Here's another example. He took a job as a secretary to get a foot in the door at that company. So he wanted to get a better job at that company, but the first step was having a job as a secretary to get that first step in. Number 7, to play it by ear. This is another really common one that we use a lot when we talk about plans. So to play it by ear means to do things without a plan or to act spontaneously. And this probably comes from the situation when a musician would play a song not with sheet music on paper, but would play the song based on what they could hear with their ears and playing spontaneously. So that can kind of help you to remember this idiom. We use this a lot to talk about things that we will do in the future, but we don't have a plan, and we're going to have to go step by step based on how things are or based on conditions. So for example, if I want to go to San Francisco tomorrow and the weather is not going to be good, I can say that I'm going to play it by ear. If I feel like going to a museum, I will, that I don't have a set plan. So here's an example sentence. I'm going to San Francisco tomorrow, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to do yet because it might rain. I'm going to play it by ear. Number 8, keep an eye out for. So we also say keep an eye open for, but keep an eye out for is more common. And notice that it's just one eye. Keep an eye out for. This means to be aware of something in case you notice it. It doesn't mean to actively look for something. It just means that you know that something is missing or you know that someone is looking for something, and you're going to just stay aware of that in case you come across it sometime. The police can tell you to keep an eye out for a person that they're looking for. Or if I lose my keys, I can tell you, I lost my keys yesterday. Can you keep an eye out for them? Or my neighbor lost his dog and we are keeping an eye out for it. So we're just staying aware just in case we see it at some point. Number 9, to keep an eye on something or someone. To keep an eye on sounds similar to keep an eye out for, but the meaning is totally different. To keep an eye on something means that you are watching something. I use this all the time because I tell my kids, please keep an eye on our dog. If I have soup on the stove and it's cooking, I can say that I need to keep an eye on the soup. I can't walk away and just leave it alone. I have to watch it. Finally, number 10, to have a sweet tooth. This is an easy one. To have a sweet tooth means that a person loves sweets. They love candy, chocolate, cake, and we just use this a lot to describe the type of food that people like. So I can say, for example, I don't eat cake, I don't really have a sweet tooth. Or I can say, I'm trying to cut down on sugar, but it's not easy because I have a huge sweet tooth. Let me know in the comments below if you can think of other idioms that include body parts, and I'll let you know if those are idioms that we often use. And be sure to let me know if you have questions. And stay tuned for more videos coming soon about idioms. As always, thank you so much for your support. Take care, and I'll see you soon.